Imagine you were never taught anything in school. Do you still think that you would believe that you lived on a spinning ball orbiting the sun? Spinning thousands upon thousands of miles per hour? Every day we observe the regular path of the sun and the moon. Our observation is consistent. But what isn't consistent? Inconsistency would describe the movement of the constellations and luminaries as the Earth would spin under the heliocentric model. Imagine you're standing in a forest and you're spinning in a circle, basically making yourself dizzy. Now in this forest, you're spinning around a large tree, and as you're spinning around that large tree, other trees outside that tree are also spinning around that tree. But also, that large tree that you're spinning around is also spinning, while other trees further out in the forest spin and orbit, all in different fields of motion. Imagine this. Now you can begin to get a hold on the ludicrousy of the heliocentric model. This is the basis for this round Earth. The study of cosmology is ancient, yet every single tool that the ancients had, we currently have at our disposal. Yet, we often get caught up in this false propaganda regurgitation. Whenever we hear somebody say something, especially someone in an academic field, those we believe to be intellectual, those that we think they know what they're talking about, it becomes this unwritten, uninvestigated truth. Is the earth round? Is the earth flat? I've heard from respected academic sources that the ancients knew the earth was round. Did they? These are the things that people are all too comfortable regurgitating without any foundation or basis. The inclinations of those who promote lies, whether intentionally or ignorantly, are wicked. So your favorite scientists and your favorite teachers, when they regurgitate the words of charlatans at the expense of truth, they are wicked. Even more wicked to defend a lie on the basis that they actually put in the time and labor to produce those fruits of whatever endeavor they're trying to prove.
Does that mean you don't believe in slavery?
Is your regurgitated answer a result of your own labor? Or is it a result of lazily accepting a lie because you lack the will to discover the truth yourself? You ever notice there's this evil energy behind people who question flat earthers? I've come across it a few times. I know a lot of people have come across that attitude, and it personally makes me sick because I can smell the stench of their blind conformity from a mile away in their condescending approach to the idea that the earth could possibly be flat. I am going to say this because it's true. We do not live on a spinning ball. The earth is neither round nor flat. But for the purpose of truth and our common perception, it is definitely closer to flat than round and spinning. However, there are levels to this, and our perspective of what we think the universe looks like is totally bastardized. When I say there are levels to this, there are levels. The world is not just a circle within an enclosed sea, like the Gleason model people are used to seeing. There's this idea that the Gleason model is 100% truth. That is not true. Anyone who has studied ancient maps knows that there are lands that lie north of the poles and lands that lie in the south yet to be recorded on a modern map. These lands in the north could be phantoms, yet we know them to be documented accurately during a time when producing such an accurate depiction of undiscovered land would have been an immensely labor-intensive project. How do we know this to be true? Because there exist accurate depictions of the north and south. Cardinal directions in which I use extreme quotations. How do we know there's any land behind what they call the North Pole? All we have at this point are some old maps and some new lies. You have to dig deeper than the charlatan's paper trail. Harvard, MIT, NASA, these are flagship Masonic Brotherhood enterprises. They propagate the very information that all other information is built upon. How reliable do you think these gatekeeper institutions really are?
The North Pole used to be a no man's land, but these are the days when by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. Yet only 60 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily.
One of the most illuminating mysteries in modern history are the accounts of Admiral Byrd. Byrd, most assuredly a Freemason and high-ranking Navy admiral, recorded his accounts flying into the poles. There in the poles, the magnetic polarity shifted, and he traveled into another world. And by another world, I mean a continental-sized landmass that was previously undiscovered.
The North Pole used to be a no-man's land.
And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily.
Over 50 years ago, he stated that the North Pole had already become crowded, not because it was inhabitable, but because it was militarily useful. He even goes on to say, to an even bigger surprise, that there is an undiscovered area the size of the U.S. in Antarctica, which presents a huge question as to the legitimacy of the modern map as it relates to Antarctica. Admiral Byrd described Antarctica as an untapped reservoir of natural resources and the most important place in the world for science.
I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that,
what is he trying to say here? It has to do with future generations.
The future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime. Because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources.
It seems that Byrd contradicts everything we think we know about the North and South Pole. He described the South as a plateau that extends up to 14,000 feet high. Then he suspiciously says that the climates in the North and South are opposite. He exclaims that the North isn't all that cold. This is totally contradictory to what we learned about the North Pole growing up in school. The first man to explore deeply into the poles says something that completely contradicts popular science. Quotes from the memoirs of Admiral Byrd.
The following is a reading of the official transcripts of Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd's flight logs recording during and shortly after his pioneering journey deep into the unknown regions of the Arctic North Pole on the 19th of February 1947. 0815 hours. Radio check with base camp, situation normal. 0830 hours. Turbulence encountered again. Increase altitude to 2,900 feet, smooth flight conditions again. 0910 hours. Vast ice and snow below. Note coloration of a yellowish nature and disperse in a linear pattern. Altering course for better examination of this color pattern below. Note reddish or purple color also. Circle this area 2 full turns and return to assigned compass heading. Position check made again to base camp and relay information concerning colorations in the ice and snow below. 0910 hours. Both magnetic and gyro compasses beginning to gyrate and wobble. We are unable to hold our heading by instrumentation. Take bearing with sun compass, yet all seems well. The controls are seemingly slow to respond and have sluggish quality, but there is no indication of icing. 0915 hours. In the distance is what appears to be mountains. 0949 hours. 29 minutes elapsed flight time from the first sighting of the mountains. It is no illusion. They are mountains and are consisting of a small range that I have never seen before. 0955 hours. Altitude changed to 2,950 feet, encountering strong turbulence again. 1000 hours. We are crossing over the small mountain range and still proceeding northward as best as can be ascertained. Beyond the mountain range is what appears to be a valley with a small river or stream running through the center portion. There should be no green valley below. Something is definitely wrong and abnormal here. We should be over ice and snow. To the port side are great forests growing on the mountain slopes. Our navigation instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. 1005 hours. I alter altitude to 1,400 feet and execute a sharp turn to better examine the valley below. It is green with either moss or a type of knit grass. The light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below us. It appears to be an elephant. No, it looks more like a mammoth. This is incredible. Yet there it is. Decrease altitude to 1,000 feet and take binoculars to better examine the animal. It is confirmed. It is definitely a mammoth-like animal. Report this to base camp. 1030 hours. Encountering more rolling green hills now. The external temperature indicator reads 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Continuing on our heading now. Navigation instruments seem normal now. I am puzzled over their actions. Attempting to contact base camp. Radio is not functioning. 1130 hours. Countryside below is more level and normal, if I may use that word. Ahead we spot what seems to be a city. This is impossible. Aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. My God. Off our port and starboard wings are a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are dish-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. It's a type of swastika. This is fantastic. Where are we? What has happened? I tug at the controls again. They will not respond. We are caught in an invisible vice grip of some type. 1135 hours. Our radio crackles and a voice comes through in English with what is perhaps a slight Nordic or Germanic accent. The message is, "Welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral, you are in good hands." I note the engines of our plane have stopped running. The aircraft is under some strange control and is now turning itself. The controls are useless. 1140 hours. Another radio message received. We begin the landing process now, and in moments the plane shudders slightly and begins a descent as though caught in some great unseen elevator. The downward motion is negligible, and we touch down with only a slight jolt. 1145 hours. I am making a hasty last entry in the flight log. Several men are approaching on foot toward our aircraft. They are tall with blonde hair. In the distance is a large shimmering city pulsating with rainbow hues of color. I do not know what is going to happen now, but I see no signs of weapons on those approaching. I hear now a voice ordering me by name to open the cargo door. I comply. End log. From this point, I write all the following events here from memory. It defies the imagination. It would seem all but madness if it had not happened. The radio man and I are taken from the aircraft, and we are received in a most cordial manner. We were then boarded on a small platform-like conveyance with no wheels. It moves us toward the glowing city with great swiftness. As we approach, the city seems to be made of a crystal material. Soon we arrive at a large building that is a type I have never seen before. It appears to be right out of the design board of Frank Lloyd Wright, or perhaps more correctly, out of a Buck Rogers setting. We are given some type of warm beverage, which tasted like nothing I have ever savored before. It is delicious. After about 10 minutes, two of our wondrous appearing hosts come to our quarters and announce that I am to accompany them. I have no choice but to comply. I leave my radio man behind, and we walk a short distance and enter into what seems to be an elevator. We descend downward for some moments. The machine stops and the door lifts suddenly upward. We then proceed down a long hallway that is lit by a rose-colored light that seems to be emanating from the very walls themselves. One of the beings motions for us to stop before a great door. Over the door is an inscription that I cannot read. The great door slides noiselessly open, and I am beckoned to enter. One of my hosts speaks. "Have no fear, Admiral. You are to have an audience with the Master." I step inside, and my eyes adjust to the beautiful coloration that seems to be filling the room completely. Then I begin to see my surroundings. What greeted my eyes is the most beautiful sight of an entire existence. It is in fact too beautiful and wondrous to describe. It is exquisite and delicate. I do not think there exists a human term that can describe it in any detail with justice. My thoughts are interrupted in a cordial manner by a warm, rich voice of melodious quality. "I bid you welcome to our domain, Admiral." I see a man with delicate features and with the etching of years upon his face. He is seated at a long table. He motions me to sit down in one of the chairs. After I am seated, he places his fingertips together and smiles. He speaks softly again and conveys the following. "We have let you enter here because you are of noble character and well known on the surface world, Admiral." Surface world. I half gasped under my breath. "Yes," the Master replies with a smile. "You are in the domain of the Ariani, the inner world of Earth. We shall not long delay your mission, and you will be safely escorted back to the surface and for a distance beyond. But now, Admiral, I shall tell you why you have been summoned here. Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. It was at that alarming time we sent our flying machines, the Flügelrads, to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. That is of course past history now, my dear Admiral, but I must continue on. You see, we have never interfered before in your race's wars and barbarity, but now we must, for you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for man, namely, that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the powers of your world, and yet they do not heed. Now you have been chosen to be witness here that our world does exist. You see, our culture and science is many thousands of years beyond your race, Admiral." I interrupted, "But what does this have to do with me, sir?" The Master's eyes seemed to penetrate deeply into my mind, and after studying me for a few moments he replied, "Your race has reached the point of no return, for there are those among you who would destroy your very world rather than relinquish their power as they know it." I nodded, and the Master continued, "In 1945 and afterward, we tried to contact your race, but our efforts were met with hostility, and our Flügelrads were fired upon. Yes, even pursued with malice and animosity by your fighter planes. So now, I say to you, my son, there is a great storm gathering in your world, a black fury that will not spend itself for many years. There will be no answer in your arms. There will be no safety in your science. It may rage on until every flower of your culture is trampled, and all human things are leveled in vast chaos. The recent war was only a prelude of what is yet to come for your race. We here see it more clearly with each hour. Do you say I am mistaken?" "No," I answer. "And happened once before. The Dark Ages came and they lasted for more than 500 years. Yes, my son, replied the master. The Dark Ages that will come now for your race will cover the earth like a pall. But I believe that some of your race will live through the storm. Beyond that, I cannot say. We see at a great distance a new world stirring from the ruins of your race, seeking its lost and legendary treasures. And they will be here, my son, safe in our keeping. When that time arrives, we shall come forward again to help you revive your culture and your race. Perhaps by then, you will have learned the futility of war and its strife, and after that time, certain of your culture and science will be returned for your race to begin anew. You, my son, are to return to the surface world with this message. With these closing words, our meeting seemed at an end. I stood for a moment as in a dream, but yet I knew this was reality, and for some strange reason, I bowed slightly, either out of respect or humility, I do not know which. Suddenly, I was again aware that the two beautiful hosts who had brought me here were again at my side. This way, Admiral, mentioned one. I turned once more before leaving and looked back toward the master. A gentle smile was etched on his delicate and ancient face. Farewell, my son, he spoke. Then he gestured with a lovely, slender hand a motion of peace, and our meeting was truly ended. Quickly, we walked back through the great door of the master's chamber and once again entered into the elevator. The door slid silently downward, and we were once again going upward. One of my hosts spoke again. We must now make haste, Admiral, as the master desires to delay you no longer on your scheduled timetable, and you must return with his message to your race. I said nothing. All of this was almost beyond belief, and once again my thoughts were interrupted as we stopped. I entered the room and was again with my radio man. He had an anxious expression on his face. As I approached, I said, "It is all right, Howie. It is all right." The two beings motioned us toward the awaiting conveyance. We boarded and soon arrived back at the aircraft. The engines were idling and we boarded immediately. The whole atmosphere seemed charged now with a certain air of urgency. After the cargo door was closed, the aircraft was immediately lifted by that unseen force until we reached an altitude of 2,700 feet. Two of the aircraft were alongside for some distance, guiding us on our return way. I must state here, the airspeed indicator registered no reading, yet we were moving along at a very rapid rate. Entry flight log continues. 0215 hours. A radio message comes through. We are leaving you now, Admiral. Your controls are free. Auf Wiedersehen. We watched for a moment as the Flugelrads disappeared into the pale blue sky. The aircraft suddenly felt as though caught in a sharp downdraft for a moment. We quickly recovered her control. We do not speak for some time. Each man has his thoughts. 0220 hours. We are again over the vast areas of ice and snow, approximately 27 minutes from base camp. We radio them, they respond. We report all conditions normal. Base camp expresses relief at our re-established contact. 0300 hours. We land smoothly at base camp. I have a mission. End log entries. March 11th, 1947. I have just attended a staff meeting at the Pentagon. I have stated fully my discovery and the message from the master. All is duly recorded. The President has been advised. I am now detained for several hours. 6 hours, 39 minutes to be exact. I am interviewed by top security forces and a medical team. It was an ordeal. I am placed under strict control via the national security provisions of the United States of America. I am ordered to remain silent in regard to all that I have learned on behalf of humanity. Incredible. I am reminded that I am a military man and I must obey orders. Now, the long night begins to approach, but there shall be no end. Just as the long night of the Arctic ends, the brilliant sunshine of truth shall come again, and those who are of darkness shall fall in its light. For I have seen that land beyond the pole, that center of the great unknown. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, United States Navy, December 24th, 1956.
There are secrets about this universe that have always been hidden. The only way to really understand this universe is the will to learn things yourself rather than blindly accepting popular lies. We do not live on a spinning ball. We do not live on a flat, circular plane, i.e. the Gleason model standard map of the world. Many people have fully accepted the Gleason model, but the Gleason model excludes areas we know to exist, just like the globe Earth model, both deceptively hiding lands from the public. Another Hegelian dialectical mind control mechanism. Under these opposing theories, the Earth can only be either one of two things, flat or round, and the box of perception has been created, the two-party system of mental construction, Democrat or Republican. No viable option, just the illusion of a decision. Our thoughts have been molded and constructed. Not are we ever to question. We will blindly defend a lie, because without those lies, why did we spend all of that time in school learning all of that stuff if it was all just a lie? And if you're asking yourself, why did they do that? It doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to ban blacks from reading. It didn't make sense to burn all books. It didn't make sense that Admiral Byrd flew into another civilization far advanced from ours and the government still chooses to hide it. It didn't make sense that North Pole maps depict an entirely frozen terrain north of Melville Island, but several explorers have recorded temperatures in the 70s. Where are the continental land masses in the north depicted on older maps? More than just Mercator maps had these land masses. Ironically and unsurprisingly, these maps seem to disappear after the colonization of the Americas. Around 1500 is when you really start seeing maps that no longer covered around the northern continents above Canada, Europe, and Asia. In the book, The Smoky God, Olaf Jansen tells the story of he and his father's trip into the land deep into the north, where the trees were as tall as mountains, where the men were as tall as trees. The ancient civilization far advanced from ours in a world far away from ours. Olaf and his father, in a similar fashion, received warm hospitality in kind to the same hospitality received from Admiral Byrd during his trip into the very same pole. Did Admiral Byrd and Olaf Jansen meet the same civilization? For the purposes of opening your mind to new ideas, I want to introduce you to two additional models. Our brain has already been trapped into the box of perspective by the globe Earth and flat Earth model, both of which seem pretty explanatory. In our first alternative model, we'll look at Dante's universe. There are 3 conceptions in Dante's universe. Inferno, which are levels of hell. In Dante's description, there are 9 levels. Purgatorio, which are levels of purgatory. And Paradiso, which are levels of paradise, aka the spheres of the heavens. When we mention Dante, you need to know that Dante isn't the originator of this conception. He is a romanticized repackaging and forgery from the book of Enoch. Whatever Dante is telling you in his Divine Comedy is what is nearly impossible to visualize in the book of Enoch from just the words left for us to consume. For those who have never read Dante's Divine Comedy, whenever you get a chance, definitely check it out. It's not going to be the most entertaining read, but in order to understand an entirely different geometric layout of the universe, it is necessary. This should at least expand your imagination. The book of Enoch is really where it's at. And if you look at some of the models that have been compiled of Dante's universe, you can start to see the picture. Dante's Inferno, or Hell, is a circular underworld gradually narrowing at the bottom. There are 9 circles, each circle representing a type of wickedness. In the first circle, tortured souls are trapped in limbo. In the second circle, the lustful souls are held in bondage. In the third circle, those who suffer from the sin of gluttony are held. In the fourth circle, those who suffered from greed. In the fifth circle, those who suffered from wrath. In the sixth circle, those who suffered from heresy. In the seventh circle, those violent ones. In the eighth circle, those fraudulent ones. And finally, in the ninth circle, those treacherous ones. Each circle, of course, representing a type of wickedness. After death, these souls are kept in bondage. The amount of torment depended on the wickedness of their sin. The underworld is full of agony and tortured souls. In the bottom, the ninth circle of hell, Satan is being held in a frozen, tortured bondage. Just as in Inferno, Purgatorio is represented in levels as well. But rather than an abyss that descends deep into the underworld, Purgatory is a mountain. And each level or terrace also represents a level of sin similar to the levels of hell and Inferno. But these levels represent a different type of sin. Quote, the classification of sin here is more psychological than that of the Inferno, based on motives rather than actions. It is also primarily from Christian theology rather than from classical sources. The core of the classification is based on love. The first 3 terraces of purgatory relate to perverted love directed towards actual harm of others. The 4th terrace relates to deficient love, i.e. sloth. And the last 3 terraces relate to excessive or disordered love of good things. Each terrace purges a particular sin in an appropriate manner. Those in purgatory can leave their circle voluntarily, but will only do so when they have corrected the flaw within themselves that led to committing that sin. The final model of the Divine Comedy is called Paradiso. Quote, paradise is depicted as a series of concentric spheres surrounding the earth, consisting of the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the fixed stars, and the Empyrean. This was written in the early 14th century. Allegorically, the poem represents the soul's ascent to God. And of course, this provides another way for us to examine the Book of Enoch. When we combine Dante's universe with the Norb theory, we can start to see things align more with our newly enlightened inclinations. Now we are starting to make sense of the symmetry of our universe.
Over the last 6 months, I've been working on a model of what the universe could look like from a geocentric point of view. Obviously, we've got the mainstream point of view, which is obviously very wrong in many ways, and possibly right in other ways as well, which I'm going to try and prove today. But the ancients, quite obviously, knew a lot more than we know today about these truths. So I used a method that I learned off Santos, the method of syncretism, to try and connect the dots and come up with a cohesive, geocentric universe that makes sense, at least. Of course, we'll never know the truth, the whole truth, naturally, in this state of consciousness. But I think we can certainly get as close to it as possible through syncretism and other means as well. So that's what I've done. I've syncretized mainly 4 avenues. I've syncretized Vedic scriptures, Kemetic Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, a bit of the Bible, and a bit of the science we're taught today, mainstream science. There's a lot of truth in there. We just have to be able to decipher what they're telling us, but they are telling us quite a few truths, which I think might be a bit controversial in the flat earth community, but I'm sure my argument is going to be quite compelling, hopefully. So now we've got that. So the next bit was to now put form to the universe. Okay, so now we've established, we've got at the top, we've got blue shift, blue fire. Okay, at the bottom we've got red fire, red shift. These are both polarity, magnetism. Okay, different forms of magnetism. You know, different modalities of magnetism. Okay, in the middle we now have the ether. Okay, we've got air. At the bottom we've got the water. In the Bible, they say God separated the waters above from the waters below. So the waters above are the atmospheres. The waters below are the actual waters below. Okay. In the middle is where Earth comes in. Okay. This is where Earth. The Kemetic Egyptians said in the middle, in the beginning, God created the Ben-Ben. And Ben-Ben translates to mound or pyramid. Okay, so a mound or a pyramid was created. This is Gaia in Greek mythology. It's Geb, Mother Geb in Kemetic Egypt. Same thing, right? So this tells me that this must be a pyramid of some sort, the Earth originally, and probably still is today. Now you see those elements that we always talk about: Earth, wind or air or ether, water, and fire. Building blocks of life. Right? These are the first physical building blocks of life in our universe. Right? Earth, where we are, the air above us, atmosphere, the waters below us, and the fire would be the heavens and the hells, top and bottom. Right? This is the Bhuloka in Vedic cosmology. Right, I'll try and Okay, let's go into detail, right? This Buluka, right? The Egyptians said it was the Ben, a pyramid. And I think it looks something like this, okay? As above, so below. So it's a pyramid at the top and a pyramid at the bottom, okay? Right? I think at the center here, at some stage, there was a capstone, right? Which I'll explain in a minute. At the moment, it's a crater, but I'll explain that in detail in a moment. Now, mainstream science tells us that our Earth has got three layers, three inner layers. There's a crust, a mantle, an inner core, and an outer core, right? But they tell us that this is on a spinning ball. I'm saying that it is not. What they're actually trying to tell us is that these are the four layers in the Ben. This is the cross section, by the way, okay? And I'll show you what it is a cross section of. The crust, the mantle, the inner core, and the outer core inside the Earth, which is basically this. This is the Ben. This is the Earth. But this is the top half. So if you imagine this at the top, there's also a bottom bit, an upside down pyramid. Okay? And that is sitting on the great deep, on the waters below. And above, you've got the waters above, which are the atmospheres. Right? So when they tell us that the Earth has got three layers, a crust, a mantle, an inner core, and an outer core, that is inner Earth, inside this Ben. The layer between the two pyramids. So there's some truth in that. Okay? Right. Now that we established that this is what the whole Earth looks like, our entire Earth is a pyramid Bhumandala with four concentric rings. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything is in fours in the universe. Right? All creation is in fours in the universe. Right? At the center, we've got what we now know as the Garden of Eden. So anyone who's been following our videos will know about this. The Garden of Eden's at the center. This is where we are here, the second ring. There's an outer ring and an outer ring outside that, all separated by these mountains, what we call the Antarctica ice wall. Okay, this is our South Pole, the Antarctica. And the North Pole, there is a mountain range separating us from the worlds at the center, from Eden, from Shambhala, Hyperborea. Okay? And outside they've got their own wall separating from this. This last one has got the greatest one. It's called the Loka Mountains in Vedic scriptures. These are the Loka Mountains, the great mountains. Right? And these are the last mountains before the torus field, the cosmic egg. Okay? So beyond this, there is no land. It's the cosmic egg blocking us out from the void outside. Right? So let's focus on the center, on where we are, and what that might look like. Okay? There's some really important bits. Okay. Around each of these four worlds is also in torus field. So remember, this is in the torus field. Each of these worlds also has its own torus field cocooning it. So there's a torus field around this outer world, there's a torus field around this one, there's a torus field around that one, and there's a torus field at the center. Okay? And what that would look like, essentially, is something like this. Okay? From our perspective, from where we are. Right? Almost like those Russian dolls. Right? So there's one at the center, a torus field like that. There's one on the outside, on the outer worlds, a bigger one. Then there's a bigger one on the outside. Right? Now, I noticed something very interesting about this. These toroidal fields, right, are probably oblate spheroids in shape. So when mainstream science and NASA says the Earth is an oblate spheroid, this is what they're telling us. They're kind of telling us a half-truth, right? Which is why they can blatantly lie with a straight face, because they know they're usurping the truth. And when it comes out, they'll just probably say, well, you're too stupid to understand what we're saying, but we're telling you the truth. So this is an oblate spheroid. Underneath where we are, this is where the 4 layers would be: the crust, the mantle, inner core, and outer core. Just like mainstream science says, right? Inner Earth. And above us, we've got the 3 atmospheres within our toroidal field. We've got the troposphere, the stratosphere, right? The mesosphere, and the thermosphere inside our torus field. This top bit is what mainstream science calls the Van Allen belt. This is the Van Allen belt, this toroidal field. Right? They tell us there's a field of energy that they cannot go past called the Van Allen belt. This is it. By the way, they also tell us that there are 5 Van Allen belts in the universe. So that's the 4 of the worlds, the 5th one being the outermost one. They also tell us that our universe is covered with cosmic background microwave radiation, which is basically a torus field. So they're telling us that our whole universe is inside a torus field. Cosmic background radiation, electromagnetism. So again, they're telling us the truths, but in a twisted way so that we don't figure out exactly what it is. Okay? So that is what it would look like from our perspective. Right. I also hypothesize that these toroidal fields have got different motions that they're moving at. Okay? So science tells us that the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour on its axis. Yeah? And then it's spinning at 67,000 miles an hour around the sun. And then it's spinning at 490,000 miles an hour in the universe. Again, there is some truth in that. It's not a complete lie. So the terra firma we're standing on is obviously not spinning, but the toroidal fields around us are spinning. Okay? So I've depicted it here on this cross section. Okay? So here, we've got the pyramid Bhumandala. We've got the toroidal fields going around each of the lands, over and underneath. Right? 1 at the center, 2 where we are, 3 on the outside world, and the 4th one on the furthest out world. Okay? Our toroidal field is probably moving at 1,000 miles an hour, that vortex. And this toroidal field, which is being powered, well, all of them are being powered by that cosmic vortex that we talked about in the beginning. This is the engine room that's powering the energy of all these toroidal fields. Right? Because that runs straight through the middle. Okay? So that's moving at 1,000 miles an hour on its axis, which is that axis, just like mainstream science tells us. The next toroidal field is moving at 67,000 miles an hour around our sun, which I'll explain why in a minute. And the outer one is moving in our universe at 490,000 miles an hour, the last one. So if these figures are true, and my syncretism is true, or it's close, then this is what I think that means. Okay?
The Norb theory provides an entirely new perspective to the term outer space. The model here shows how planets are actually other suns or major luminaries in other parts of the undiscovered world. For example, the sun and moon are the dominant luminaries on Earth or in our realm. But in lands far away, planets act as the sun or celestial sphere. Now think about that and think about the rotation of the luminaries and the rotation of the constellations. I saw a similar model a few years back. This guy had what looked like an 8th grade science project. It was a model of the world similar to what we saw with the Norb theory, and he explained it very well. Just like the Norb theory, there are some things that I didn't 100% agree with. But that's okay, because we're not supposed to agree on everything. We are supposed to be consistently working toward truth. We can combine our intelligence and the things we have passion for. We combine the best parts of the intent of our work, and we can acquire a greater understanding. So when I first saw the video, I was impressed with this middle school science project, even if it was made by a grown man. I was just proud of somebody who had spent the time to build a model. And then the Norb theory took it to the next level. The top-notch graphics explain things clearly that may not otherwise be effectively articulated. Although it is just a theory, the ball is rolling intelligently. These models and mock-ups are expanding our mind into what the universe really is. As I am standing outside making this recording, I am staring at the sun and at the moon at the same time. And it is 3:26 p.m. The book of Ezra says there will be a time when the sun starts shining by night and the moon by day. Looks like we're halfway there. You can't slip being on a spinning ball past people who study the sky on a daily. But today, we just look at our phones and our televisions. We are not looking at the sky. We don't respect the sun. We don't respect the moon. We don't respect this beautiful universe created for us. So we don't understand it. Therefore, we are still ignorant. But some of us are starting to climb out of that hole of ignorance just by opening our minds beyond the laws of the thought police. We are all taking this journey together, so you don't have to feel like you're alone. There are like-minded people out here, and the propaganda machines never want us to assemble. Yet, here we are, assembling in the mind. That's where it happens first. We build off these ideas. We will continue to push ourselves for greater understanding when it comes to the makeup of the universe. This essential knowledge leads to our wisdom and a better life for our children. There are people today who claim to live righteously, yet poison themselves with apathetic iniquity. They poison the minds of their children with propagated deception. People have been given this idea that living righteously is blindly conforming to mental and social constructs just to feel accepted. The more we learn about history and the great people from our past, usually the greatest people are the ones who get persecuted and misunderstood. The truth isn't a sliding scale of interpretation. The truth is law. You can't slip being on a spinning ball past people who study the sky on a daily.